Welcome to the Safety in Numbers podcast. I'm your hostess, Sheila Hansen. This is episode 15 and part 5 of my classroom management series. So if you feel like you've had it up to here with your students and you are a bit overwhelmed with all of the other things you have to do on top of that, I'm here to help. Quick review of parts 1 through 4 of the class management series. The main thing on having good classroom management is to build some sort of a connection, positive connection with your students. Then you also need to have a strong chain of support, and you need to know what you need in order to teach well, and then you must teach the kids how to behave that way. You also need to know your worth and your boundaries so your students know what to expect from you. And good classroom management does give you the keys to your kingdom, the keys to high quality teaching, safety in your classroom, loving your job. But as you know, there is no one-size-fits-all formula. You're just going to have to figure out a way to make it work for yourself. And consistency and honesty are what's going to really make or break your system. Doing things the same and being honest with yourself as to whether or not it's working. In this episode, I'm going to be exploring the difference between punishment and consequences and when to use each one. So we're at this point where you've set up your class management system, and now you have students who are testing your management, and you're going to have to do something about it. The definition of a consequence is a natural response or a reaction to an action. Some examples include, like an action I take, I spill my coffee. Consequence, I burn my arm and I have to clean it up. Here's a lack of action. I didn't pay my cell phone bill on time. The consequence is my phone gets shut off. So those are natural consequences. That's just what happens when you either do something or you don't do something. A punishment, on the other hand, is an imposed response or reaction to an action. Most of the time, it is not at all connected to the offending behavior. So some examples would be, you spill your coffee and you have to write sentences of, I will not spill my coffee. Writing sentences has nothing to do with what happened when you spilt your coffee. Another action, you talk when you're not supposed to. Punishment, you have to write sentences. I will not talk without permission. Action, I drive my car over the speed limit. Punishment, I get a ticket and I must pay a fine. Paying a fine has nothing to do with speeding, but the consequences of speeding are that it could be very dangerous and cause an accident. So punishment in that case, and punishment in all cases, is meant to stop behavior before it happens. So by people not wanting to pay a fine, they're more likely to do the speed limit, unless you're certain people that I know. A consequence teaches you to change your behavior by knowledge of what's going to happen afterwards. So if you don't know what's going to happen and you do it and then you find out what happens, that knowledge generally changes behavior. For example, I will not try to answer my phone while holding my coffee in the same hand because it caused me to spill the coffee and I got burnt and I made a mess. As I said before, a punishment is meant to deter you from certain behaviors. So I will not try to answer my phone while holding coffee in the same hand because I don't like writing sentences. Or I won't talk when the teacher is talking because I don't want to have to write sentences. Or I don't want to have to pay that expensive fine for speeding, so I'm going to drive the speed limit. Punishments build a reminder of how not to behave. Things like ISS, OSS, writing sentences, timeouts, lunch detentions, all of those things are forms of punishment. In general, a consequence, a natural consequence, is more effective than a punishment because the offender can see how their own behavior caused it. So my behavior brought trouble on me because I tried to do too many things at once, answering my cell phone while holding my coffee in the same hand and dumping it all over myself. That was a natural consequence. Natural consequences build knowledge and change behavior by trial and error. And that error is really the natural consequence, or what happens because of the error. It is the most natural way of learning anything, whether it is learning how to walk as a baby or learning how to drive a standard. I had to learn by trial and error. Now, punishment is a word that generally has some not so good feelings that come with it. So many people are like, you should never use punishment. Well, I disagree. Punishment is not necessarily a bad way of handling a problem. It's often way more convenient. Generally, it's not as immediately effective as natural consequences, but natural consequences are not always available or not always appropriate. And if punishment is done in anger, then yes, punishment can actually make the problem worse by completely destroying the relationship that you have with your student. So I used natural consequences for things like, well, I allowed kids to have food and drink in my classroom. I taught math. There was really no electronics, or we did have Chromebooks occasionally, and when we had Chromebooks, they weren't allowed to have food and drink on their desks. But when we were just doing notes or using manipulatives, I let them have a snack and a drink if they brought it to class. Now, if a student made a mess, like they spilled their drink or they dropped their chips, the natural consequence is for them to clean it up, just to make it right, and then to clean it up to my satisfaction. A student that left a mess behind, so they had some chips and a drink, and they leave classroom when class is over, and they leave their trash on the table, the natural consequence to that is that they're not mature enough to have snacks and drinks in my classroom. So I always feel sorry for them. I'm so sorry, but you're not mature enough to have the privilege of having a snack and a drink in my classroom because you left your mess behind last time. But I was in a hurry because I was going to be late. I know, yeah, and I'm sorry. You cannot have snacks and drinks in my classroom for a while. We'll try it again in next quarter or something like that. They left their homework in the locker. The natural consequence to that is that they can turn their homework in, but they're going to have to turn it in either at the end of the day or after class, and it's going to be late. That's the natural consequence. Or if somebody doesn't do their homework or study and they fail a test, which happens a lot in 7th grade, the test in my classroom, the natural consequence of that is that you don't get to retake tests, ever. I never allowed test retakes. And the grade that they earned stands because that's what they earned. And when I allowed that to stand, you better believe the next chapter, they actually did their homework rather than copying it off the internet, and they actually did study, and they did better on the test. So they learned that their actions of not doing homework or copying homework off of their friends and not studying had a consequence. They didn't like that consequence, and they knew they didn't like it because I allowed them to experience it. They got to feel what it feels like to fail a test. And no, that's not comfortable. But that uncomfortable feeling is what changes their behavior in the future. It's probably the most important part of a natural consequence. When using natural consequences, oftentimes it seems mean to some people. Things like no retakes on tests, or if you forgot your homework, it's late, or if you forgot your field trip money, you don't go. Those are natural consequences. Because the kid is experiencing a natural pain and discomfort, that pain and discomfort is what makes those consequences so effective. If we don't allow students to experience those natural consequences, the natural consequences to their actions, then they will continue to make those same mistakes. And they will never develop the experience and the endurance to deal with uncomfortable emotions and to recover for themselves. Because if they're never allowed to experience the natural consequence, that doesn't ever have to develop. And you have to be put into a situation where you feel it and go through it in order for that skill to develop. You can't just talk about it. Now, some natural consequences should not be allowed. For example, if you have a small child that wants to play on the highway, the natural consequence to playing on the highway is getting hit by a car. You don't want to allow them to experience that natural consequence because it's devastating. That's obvious. So yes, in those cases, you would use things like punishment if they got too close to the road or something like that, or you don't get to play with that ball anymore, in order to teach them that that's not what a good thing to do. When a natural consequence would cause serious physical harm, then yes, you save the child. You don't allow them to feel that natural consequence. But when the consequences are not physically harming and they connect directly to the child's behavior, then it becomes a valuable teacher in itself. That consequence becomes the teacher. And the child connects their behavior to the consequence, and then they naturally want to avoid that behavior or avoid that consequence, so they change their behavior. So if you forgot your field trip money and you don't go on this field trip, the next field trip you're going to remember that feeling and be the first one to turn in your field trip money. That's the way it works. Now, is it going to completely ruin their life that they didn't get to go to the zoo? No, I survived. Did I have to stay at school all day with another teacher? Yeah, it wasn't the end of the world, but I survived. And the next year, when the next class got to go to the zoo, guess who remembered to tell their mom? Me. And I got my field trip money in, and I got to go to the zoo. Natural consequences. When I used punishment in my classroom, it was for things in which the natural consequence was not immediately felt, or something in which our system of education has removed that natural consequence to their behavior. So things like continually not completing their homework. Used to be that if a kid didn't do their homework, then they would fail the test. And then if they failed so many tests, they would fail the class. And because they did not pass the class, they were not promoted to the next grade. Most schools no longer have that consequence in place. So we had, in all the schools I've worked with, I had kids that did not do work and were promoted anyway. And so when that natural consequence is removed, they lose the learning, the teaching that goes with what their behavior is. So I had to get creative. The kid didn't turn in their homework. I created what I called a disciplinary paragraph. And I didn't actually create it. I got the idea from another teacher. Thanks, Kevin. And the paragraphs were like half a page typed. And it was things like, I didn't complete my homework today. I didn't get good practice on this skill today, so that in the future when I take the test, it's going to be a lot harder because I never did the practice. And that's kind of the content of my paragraphs that were written. If a student had poor substitute behavior, I would often use a punishment. I would have them write an apology letter, although that could be considered a natural consequence to your behavior. If you do something rude or rowdy and cause problems, apologizing is what you should do. So I could see how that could be considered a natural consequence. Or they had a disciplinary paragraph. Again, it'd be like, Miss Hanson was not in our class today. We had a professional substitute for her. My behavior with this professional was disrespectful and dishonoring to them and myself and Miss Hanson, and so on and so forth. That's the type of paragraphs. And sometimes, if it was serious enough, they would get ISS or a lunch detention. If a student was continually never bringing their materials to class and always wanting to go to their locker to get it, again, I would have a discipline paragraph about not bringing their materials to class and the consequences that takes up. Another natural consequence to that is if they don't bring their homework to class or they didn't bring their pencils to class like they were asked to do, is that they don't get to participate in the activity for that day. And oftentimes I would have an alternate sheet for them to work on at their desk over in a corner. And I would count it for the same points. And then the kid watched the other kids as they participated in the activity, and that became a natural consequence to them. Sometimes considered a punishment, can be considered natural. When you're using punishment as discipline in your classroom, you want to make the punishment, if possible, if at all possible, have some sort of a moral lesson. So I already told you my discipline paragraphs had a moral lesson in it, and the kid would copy the paragraph, hopefully reading while they copy, although I can't control that. Or I would have them help some of the staff do some cleaning or some organizing to pay back for the time in which that custodian had to clean up their mess or something like that. That one you can't always do because there are some schools that have policies against it. Always debrief the student before and after a punishment. So you talk to the student and you tell them why they are having to do this punishment before you send them to do the punishment. And then once they are back from the punishment, or if they had to take a disciplinary paragraph home and they bring it back, then I talk to them again and I say, I want you to know that I care about you and I want you to be able to participate in our class, but I cannot teach when that kind of behavior is going on. And make sure that they understand that you didn't do it because you were angry with them. You did it because you wanted them to change their behavior. Also, never apply a punishment when you are angry or with anger. It will completely undermine the purpose of the punishment and make your student defensive. And if you've built any relationship up with this student at all, that can completely blow that out of the water too. And then you've got to start over from scratch. And sometimes I would start over by apologizing and saying, look, I am really sorry that I yelled. That was not appropriate for me to talk to you in that tone. It probably made you feel demeaned and disrespected and maybe even fearful. I apologize for what I did, and in the future, I will do things differently. That's the 4-part apology. Check out that video also in my podcast. But it also makes you feel fearful and unhappy in your own classroom because you're allowing anger to direct your behavior. So never apply a punishment with anger. So while natural consequences and punishment are necessary to maintaining good classroom management, doing all the things you need to do to prevent it is well worth the time and the effort, because it's so much more fun to build up a relationship with a student than it is to see them going through a difficult time with natural consequences or even with a punishment. It does bother me to see a student in pain, but I also know that that pain, when they work through it, makes them a stronger person. So when you notice students doing what you expect them to do, say something like, hey, I noticed that you brought your homework twice this week. You can say good job if it's a student who has a really good self-concept. If they don't, try and avoid the judgment words, because then they think you're trying to manipulate them into just doing more work. So just, I noticed you brought your homework. I noticed that you did not say mean things to Sheila today. I noticed that. Thank you. Stuff like that. Noticing the behaviors that you wish for them to repeat. Take the time to talk to a student when they first start misbehaving and get to the bottom of it. So when you see Sheila starting to, you're coming out of the honeymoon phase of school and she's got an ornery streak in her, talk to her. Don't avoid her. Start talking to her. Build a relationship with her. See what's going on in her life. And that connection with that ornery student, once you build that friendship, and it's not a sort of peer type friendship, but it's more of a friendly connection, you will find that those behaviors are rarely ever meant to just pick at you. Some students just love to pick at teachers because it's funny. It's fun. But if they find that you are not easily picked on, or you don't easily react to their picking on, and instead you pick back or you make it into a joke, then their whole power grab by doing that is gone. And they start to build a stronger relationship with you. Also, always communicate your expectations clearly and enforce your boundaries without anger. Always let a student know exactly what it is you expect. And when they don't do it, enforce your boundaries with concern and not with anger. Very important, your tone of voice there. Especially middle school. I've never taught younger than middle school. I have taught older than middle school. But middle school kids are very fine-tuned to your emotions. I would imagine all kids are. They are fine-tuned to your emotions, and they want to see if they are in control of your emotions. If a student is in control of the teacher's emotions, they can get you angry and they can get you off track, and they all of a sudden have control of the classroom. If they find that they cannot control your emotions because you are not angry and their behavior never brings out your worst emotions, then they realize that they're not in control of the classroom. They relax and start to kind of have fun. I also recommend that you keep a very simple prize box to reward a student at any time. And that's because if a student has really poor self-image, sometimes they need external motivations to get them going. So, hey, Sheila, I noticed you brought your pencil today. Because you brought it 5 days in a row, here, have a piece of candy. And that might just be between her and I. It might be, here, hey, Sheila, here's a piece of gum. I saw you brought your pencil again today. And I'm noticing that. I'm rewarding the behavior that I want. Once they start seeing in themselves that they have power over their own world by acting and acting in a positive way, they need less and less external motivation. But sometimes when you first get them going, and in a 7th grader, they might have had 7 years to build up this poor self-image. And in that case, you're going to have to use a lot of external rewards before they start seeing themselves in a more positive light. In summary, both natural consequences and punishments have their place in your classroom. Think about what you are rescuing a student from before you rescue them. And by rescuing them, I'm meaning preventing them from experiencing a natural consequence. Before you rescue them from that natural consequence, think about, what are you actually rescuing them from? Could they learn a valuable lesson by going through that uncomfortable emotion? And last, punishments should always have a moral or a debriefing where you're talking to the kid to make sure the student knows why they were punished and to make sure they know what you expect every time. And giving credit where credit is due. My management style is a blend of love and logic and choice theory. I met Dr. William Glasser in college and read his book, and I have several of his books now that kind of started my journey in classroom management styles. Very effective, very down-to-earth type things. And then when I found out about Love and Logic and I got to meet Jim Fay, I saw that their approach is very choice theory-like. They use natural consequences and things to develop, and the child's needs to develop a good relationship with the child. Those two are the roots of my management style. And also 26 years of just trial and error. I tried something, it didn't work. I failed. I tried something different. It didn't work. I tried again. I tried this book. I tried that book. I tried this system with the cards and the stickers, and I tried that system with the this and the that and the tickets. And sometimes I gleaned the good things from those and then throughout the rest. And sometimes I was like, oh, that doesn't work at all. Scrap that whole system. Let's try something new. Those trial and error types of things in the last probably 15 years of my teaching experience was pretty similar in how I taught. I didn't really change after that because I had a good system that worked. And once you find a system that works for you, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in class.